Happiness, my friend, is not a destination that waits patiently for you at the end of a long and arduous road. A reward to be collected only when every aspect of your life has been polished to a state of flawless perfection. It does not hold its breath, waiting for the day your job is finally secure, your bank account is comfortably full, or the people around you miraculously begin to behave exactly as you expect them to. Happiness makes no such promises. It does not vow to arrive on some distant, idealized day in the future. Because if you continue to live your life by the tyrannical condition of when, then, you are engaging in a tragic and self-defeating bargain. You are postponing your inalienable right to live fully right now in the only moment that has ever and will ever truly exist. Many people, perhaps even you, operate under the mistaken and culturally ingrained belief that if they can just gain control over their external circumstances, if they can eliminate the relentless nuisances, or if they can finally reach a few major culturally approved milestones, then happiness will naturally and inevitably follow, like a loyal servant. But this belief only keeps them trapped, chasing a shimmering illusion across a barren desert, because life, in its magnificent and terrifying indifference to our plans, never stops shifting. And anyone who tethers their inner peace to the fragile anchor of external stability will, sooner or later, be dashed against the rocks of disappointment. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the arrival fallacy. The deeply flawed belief that when we arrive at a certain destination, a promotion, a marriage, a financial target, we will achieve a lasting state of happiness. Yet, study after study has shown that the emotional uplift from such achievements is tragically fleeting. The joy of a new car fades. The thrill of a raise is quickly normalized. The destination, once reached, simply reveals another, more distant horizon. This is not a failure of your achievement, but a fundamental misunderstanding of the human condition. There are days, are there not, when everything on the outside seems to be going perfectly well, and yet, inside, you feel a hollow, echoing emptiness. And there are chaotic, difficult days when the world seems to be conspiring against you, yet you feel a strange and unshakable sense of inner peace. Why is this? Because your emotional states are not simple, crude reactions to your circumstances. They are the complex, nuanced reflections of how you live, how you choose to think, what you deliberately focus on, and the very lens through which you view everything. Happiness does not demand perfection from your life. It only asks that you show up with intention and awareness for each ordinary, imperfect moment. When you finally stop chasing the ghost of a flawless ideal, you begin to see the profound and quiet value of each simple second. The small but intensely real things unfolding right here, right before your very eyes. You cannot force yourself to feel joy when your inner world is a raging battlefield of conflict and unresolved tension. But you can, with the authority of a sovereign, choose to live consciously. You can choose the actions, the thoughts, and the responses that, inch by inch, bring you closer to a state of inner peace. This is not a feeling granted at random by a benevolent universe. It is a skill, and like any skill, from learning a language to mastering a musical instrument, it can be practiced, repeated, nurtured, and ultimately integrated into the very fabric of your being. Just as the muscles in your body require consistent, disciplined training to grow strong, the faculty of happiness requires a carefully constructed behavioral ecosystem. From the smallest daily habits to the silent way you speak to yourself, built and reinforced day after day. Modern neuroscience has now provided the hard data to support this ancient wisdom. Groundbreaking research in the field of positive psychology has shown that while approximately 50% of our happiness baseline may be determined by genetics and only 10% by our life circumstances, a staggering 40% is derived directly from our intentional daily activities and mindset. That means you do not need a perfect life to feel fulfilled. You need a healthy, well-used mental toolkit, deployed regularly like a sacred living ritual. One of the most common and tragic mistakes we make is expecting happiness to be a loud, dramatic, and obvious event, a thunderous laugh, a glorious cinematic win. But in reality, true, sustainable happiness is often much quieter, much humbler than that. It comes from the profound stillness of sitting with a morning cup of tea, unhurried and undistracted. It comes from the deep, quiet satisfaction of finally completing a task you have long delayed. It comes from the simple, breathtaking moment you look up from your screen, see the sunlight filtering through the leaves of a tree, and feel your heart gently, almost imperceptibly, slow down. These things do not make you burst into tears of ecstatic joy, but they accumulate day by day, like tiny, perfectly placed stones, building a sturdy and unshakable emotional foundation. It is not your genetics, nor the cruel lottery of your life circumstances, but the quiet, deliberate architecture of your daily habits that shapes the vast majority of the happiness you long for. Research in the field of positive psychology has unveiled a surprising and empowering truth, a formula that dismantles the myth of a predetermined fate. Studies, most notably popularized by researcher Sonia Lyubomirsky in her seminal work, The How of Happiness, reveal that only a mere 10% of your long-term happiness is dictated by your objective, external conditions, your job, your income, your living situation, or the fickle hand of luck. About 50% is a genetic set point, an emotional predisposition you are born with and cannot fundamentally change. But the remaining 40%, a massive and decisive portion, is entirely within your sovereign control, determined each and every day through the way you choose to think, to react, to act, and to maintain your mental and behavioral habits. This is not just a comforting, philosophical thought. It is a strategic lever of immense power, because if you hold direct influence over nearly half of your entire emotional experience, why would you ever willingly hand that power over to the chaotic whims of circumstance or the unpredictable actions of other people? Most people spend their lives engaged in a meticulous and often exhausting form of external asset management. They spend countless hours planning their finances, tracking their investments, tending to their physical appearances, and building their careers with the precision of a master architect. Yet they leave their most valuable asset, their inner state, to the brutal randomness of chance. They wait for a free day, for a big success, for a moment of external validation, or for someone kind enough to come along and make them feel a fleeting sense of joy. And when those external conditions inevitably fail to materialize in the perfect sequence they had hoped for, they conclude, with a sigh of resignation, that life is simply unfair. But the formula for happiness does not lie in the world's hands. It lies in yours through the powerful and often underestimated technology of what you deliberately and consciously repeat. Every small, seemingly insignificant behavior, every choice in how you begin your morning, every silent word you whisper to yourself in the privacy of your own mind is silently and inexorably reshaping the entire emotional tone of your life. Your emotions are not random, chaotic reactions. They are the predictable result of a system, and you are the system's architect. If you consistently react with negativity to unfavorable events, you're not just having a bad day. You're actively training the intricate machinery of your brain to recognize instability, frustration, and disappointment as its normal, default state. On the other hand, if you form the disciplined habits of observing your own reactions, of accepting what you cannot change, and of deliberately reframing situations in a more constructive and positive light, you're not engaging in self-deception. You are a neurosculptor, physically rewriting the neural pathways of happiness in your own brain. This is not just talk. It is the hard science of neuroplasticity. The brain's scientifically proven ability to change its own structure and function in response to repeated behavior and thought. Every repeated action is a command sent to your brain, a directive that says, "This is how I choose to see the world. This is how I choose to live." And the brain, in its absolute and unwavering loyalty, will begin to program you to live according to what you repeat, not what you wish for. Choose a life of unconscious, reactive living, and you will get a life of chaos. Choose a life of healthy, intentional rituals, and you will gain a life of stability. The happiest people you will ever meet are not always the most blindly optimistic. They are simply the ones who engage with a greater degree of consistency in behaviors that make them feel connected, grateful, present, and in control. And all of those states are trainable. Start with simple yet high-impact habits. The habit of writing down 3 things you are genuinely grateful for at the end of each day. The habit of spending the first 10 minutes of your morning without the jarring, anxiety-inducing glow of your phone, simply breathing and feeling the fact that you are alive. The habit of responding to a loved one with a moment of patient kindness instead of a sharp, defensive reflex. The habit of choosing a short walk to clear your head instead of stewing in a complaint. These small things, when repeated with religious regularity, begin to soften the rigid, fearful mind and open up a new, more expansive way of living that you may have never before experienced. Real, lasting change does not begin with a massive, heroic effort in a single, dramatic moment. It begins with what you choose to do in the seemingly meaningless ones. And it is those choices, made when no one is watching, that ultimately shape who you really are. You do not need a grand, elaborate plan. You just need to choose the right small thing and do it consciously today. Each time you act like a happy person, you move one neurological step closer to becoming one. And here is the true miracle of your own biology. Your brain does not strongly distinguish between "I truly am this way" and "I am practicing to be this way." It only records, reinforces, and automates what you repeat the most. You can continue to live your life unconsciously, dragged along by the powerful currents of your old reactions, your old judgments, and your old fears. Or you can, at any moment, choose to interrupt that inertia with a single, small, fresh act. A more mindful choice, a different question, a new habit. Every day is a chance to reshape yourself, and no one else can do it for you. Happiness, like all things of lasting value, does not come from what you dream of. It comes from what you repeat. So, if you ask, "How can I be happier?" start with a different, more powerful question. What one habit in me is currently feeding my unhappiness? And then, change it. Just that one habit, small enough to begin today. Because 40% of your emotional life, a massive, unclaimed territory, is waiting for you to take command. Gratitude is not a polite, socially conditioned reflex. It is not the hollow "thank you" spoken out of mere courtesy. And it is certainly not a form of blind, naive optimism that desperately tries to find a silver lining in the heart of a tragedy. True gratitude is a conscious, disciplined, and often courageous state of being. It does not happen by accident. It is a deliberate and strategic choice to look at your life in its entirety, with an eye for appreciation instead of an eye for complaint. In today's fast-paced, hyper-stimulated world, a world that moves at a suffocating and inhuman speed, most people are not fundamentally lacking in good things. They are simply lacking the cultivated ability to recognize them, and that chronic lack of awareness, that perceptual blindness, causes many to live surrounded by a quiet and persistent abundance, and yet still feel utterly, achingly empty. They are not deprived of positive experiences. They have just stopped pausing long enough to truly feel what matters. Practicing gratitude does not make your difficulties magically disappear, but it completely and irrevocably changes how you move through them. You cannot avoid the inevitable challenges of life, but you can choose to focus on what still holds value even when everything else seems to be falling apart. When you are operating from a state of gratitude, you do not deny the existence of your pain. You simply refuse to grant it the power to define your entire reality. This is a critical distinction. The negative emotions may still arise, but you are no longer swept away by their turbulent currents. Gratitude acts as an anchor, a powerful, grounding force that pulls you back to your center, to the place where you can clearly see that no matter what is happening, there is always something worth holding on to. A warm cup of tea on a cold morning, a moment of gentle, sunny afternoon light, the sound of birdsong in a quiet and unexpected space, a single, compassionate glance from a stranger. These are the small, almost invisible things, so easily overlooked in the frantic rush for more. Yet, it is precisely these things that help a human being stay grounded in the heart of chaos. Gratitude does not require grand, cinematic reasons to exist. It only asks that you slow down enough to realize that every single passing moment is a fresh opportunity to experience something kind, if you're only sensitive enough to notice. And when you practice gratitude, you're not just changing your mood in the moment, you're actively and physically rebuilding the sensory and neural architecture of your own nervous system. The science on this is now overwhelmingly clear. Rigorous studies have shown that people who practice daily gratitude experience a cascade of measurable physiological benefits. Their brains produce higher levels of the feel-good neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin. They have lower levels of cortisol, the corrosive stress hormone that, over time, damages tissues and accelerates aging. They experience deeper, more restorative sleep, show greater resilience in the face of psychological stress, and report a more positive and expansive outlook on life. This is not because their lives are objectively better than others. It is because they have installed a different mental filter. They are no longer unconsciously scanning their environment for reasons to complain. They have trained their brains to actively and deliberately look for reasons to be thankful. And so, inevitably, they find them. Your perception does not reflect an absolute, objective truth. It reflects your habit of attention, and gratitude is the most powerful technology you will ever find for reprogramming that attention. Some will say, "I will be grateful when things finally get better." But the unshakable law of the inner universe is this: things only start getting better when you are first grateful. not because your circumstances magically change in response to your positive thoughts, but because you change how you interact with them. Gratitude softens the hard edges of old wounds. It opens your heart to the quiet beauty in what once seemed insignificant and mundane. It makes the ordinary feel sacred. A grateful person is not someone who has no hardships. They are simply someone who refuses to let their hardship cast a permanent shadow over the rest of their life. You do not have to wait for something big to begin. Every day, simply choose to write down 3 specific things you are grateful for. They do not have to be grand achievements. Sometimes it is just the profound and often overlooked fact that you can still breathe deeply, that you can walk in the rain, or that you received a call from someone who reached out at the exact right moment. Once you begin to list them, you will be astonished to see how generous life has already been to you. And the physical act of writing them down, of translating a fleeting thought into a concrete form, begins to awaken a more mindful and appreciative mind. A mind that no longer rushes past the quiet kindnesses of life as if they were nothing. Gratitude also acts as a powerful antidote to the modern poisons of comparison and envy. In a world of curated social media feeds, you are constantly bombarded with the highlight reels of other people's lives, a reality that is scientifically engineered to make you feel that what you have is not enough. But when you're actively appreciating what you already possess, you're far less tempted to look sideways at how others are living. You're no longer trapped in the exhausting, unwinnable race to outdo someone else, because you're too busy experiencing the quiet fullness within yourself. And that profound sense of fullness does not come from the act of possession. It comes from the act of awareness. Ultimately, gratitude is not an attitude reserved only for the moments when things go well. It is most vital, most powerful, and most necessary when you feel like you have the very least reason to be grateful. When things seem off track, when you are hurt, when life loses its familiar and comfortable order, that is when gratitude becomes the single, unbreakable thread that keeps you standing. It reminds you that something still remains, that there is still something to hold on to. And sometimes, that alone is enough to help you keep going. Gratitude does not erase your pain, but it prevents your pain from erasing you. And that is a strength you can train every single day with intention, with mindfulness, and with a sincere and open heart. Not all change requires a tectonic push. Sometimes it is the smallest, quietest action, when repeated with the unwavering devotion of a daily ritual, that creates the most lasting and profound transformation. The practice of gratitude journaling is a prime and powerful example. It takes no more than a few minutes. It demands no great intellectual or physical effort, but it holds within it the almost magical power to completely shift the very lens through which you see the world, and, by extension, the way you relate to your own life. In a world now defined by its relentless upheaval, a world where our emotions are so easily swept away by the constant, deafening noise of digital speed and social comparison, the simple, analog act of sitting down with a pen and writing what you're grateful for each day becomes a quiet act of rebellion. It is a way to reclaim a measure of sovereign mastery over your own mind. This is not a shallow, sentimental exercise. It is a potent and scientifically validated tool for the fundamental restructuring of your awareness. It systematically interrupts the frantic, forward-leaning chase after what is missing in your life, and instead, gently but firmly, helps you start noticing, appreciating, and truly inhabiting the quiet abundance that is already here. To understand why this simple practice is so powerful, you must first understand the default programming of your own brain. The human brain is not, by its nature, designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive. And for hundreds of thousands of years of our evolutionary history, survival depended on a hypervigilance to threat. This is a well-documented phenomenon known as the negativity bias. Our ancient ancestors, who were more attuned to the rustle in the bushes, a potential predator, than to the beauty of a sunset, were the ones who survived to pass on their genes. As a result, your brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. A single criticism can erase 100 compliments. One disappointing, painful experience can overshadow an entire week of sunshine and quiet joys. This is not a personal failing. It is the ancient, paranoid gatekeeper of your mind doing its job, a job it learned on the savannas of our past. But in the relative safety of the modern world, this outdated survival mechanism unintentionally and systematically robs us of our sense of sufficiency, of our peace, of our joy. And the practice of gratitude journaling is a form of deliberate neurological engineering. It is a way to consciously and strategically hack this ancient programming by dimming the blinding brightness of sorrow and systematically enhancing the sharpness and focus on kindness. All it takes is the discipline to write down 3 specific things you feel genuinely grateful for, each and every day. They do not need to be monumental events or breathtaking breakthroughs. In fact, the power of this practice is often found in its profound simplicity. A good meal, enjoyed without rushing. A night of deep, uninterrupted sleep. A message from an old friend arriving at just the right moment. Or just the simple, quiet instant you look out the window and realize the sky is a shade of blue you had not noticed before. When you physically write these things down, you're forcing your brain to do something it does not do naturally. You're compelling it to pause its endless scanning for threats and instead to actively scan your recent memory for evidence of goodness, of connection, of beauty. You're sending a clear, unequivocal signal to the deepest layers of your mind. A signal that says, I choose to focus on what is enough instead of what is lacking. And once that becomes a daily, ingrained habit, your inner world will no longer be dictated by the turbulent chaos of the outer one. Something truly magical begins to happen when you turn the act of recording gratitude into a non-negotiable daily ritual. You do not just feel more positive in the fleeting moment of writing. Your ambient awareness throughout the entire following day is gently but powerfully reshaped in a more compassionate and open direction. You start to notice more of what you have. You become more sensitive to the quiet beauty in the world, whether in visuals, in sounds, or in the subtle gestures of human kindness. And gradually, almost without your noticing, you develop a new, more resilient lens through which to view your life. Not one fogged by the smoke of scarcity, but one illuminated by the clear, steady light of an active and cultivated gratitude. This practice is especially powerful during the inevitable dark nights of the soul. The times when you feel like there is nothing left to hold on to, when everything seems tangled, when a profound loss makes you question all meaning. In those moments, the simple act of sitting down, picking up a pen, and writing down one single, small thing that still brings a flicker of warmth to your heart, that is the act of reclaiming your inner power. Not because you're engaging in a blind, foolish optimism, but because you're refusing to let your circumstances dictate the entirety of your emotional life. It is a gentle, yet unshakable form of discipline, and it is full of a quiet and profound strength. No fancy setup is needed. A simple notebook, a pen that feels comfortable in your hand, and a few quiet, uninterrupted minutes each day are all that is required. The consistency is what matters, not the format. Each time you write, you pause, you realign yourself, and you send that powerful signal to your brain. I am still present, I'm still appreciating, and that alone is enough to make a difference. The act of writing also helps to organize your emotions. By recording them, you're translating vague, often overwhelming feelings into clear, specific, and manageable words. This helps you to take charge of your emotions instead of being passively led by them. It is like giving your emotions a seat at the table, listening to them, naming them, and then, with gratitude, letting them go. Treat this practice as an essential part of your mental self-care ritual, no different from brushing your teeth or washing your face. You do not write to seem like a good person. You write to protect your inner world from decaying in the acid of unconsciousness. And if you keep this up, you will find that it is not the big, dramatic things that make the difference. It is the consistent, relentless repetition of the small, right, intentional acts. And gratitude journaling, though seemingly humble, is one of the most powerful actions you can ever take to restore a life of happiness from within. A life that is quiet, unadorned, but deep enough to keep you grounded. Every time you pick up the pen, you are telling life, I am here, and I choose to appreciate you. And life, as always, will respond with more than you ever expected. Gratitude, if it is to unleash its full, transformative power, cannot be permitted to remain a silent, secret, inner emotion. When you begin to extend it outward, transforming it from a private feeling into deliberate words, into conscious actions, and into your very presence with others, you're not just amplifying your own personal joy. You're engaging in an act of profound social alchemy. You awaken positive emotions in those around you, creating a ripple effect that extends far beyond your immediate perception. Happiness, at its deepest and most sustainable level, is not a closed, personal, hoarded state. It is a current. It is a form of energy. And the more it is shared, the more it is given away, the stronger and more abundant it becomes. And gratitude is the quiet, humble, yet incredibly powerful source that unlocks that current in the vast and interconnected web of human relationships. When you feel gratitude, but do not express it, that emotion is merely a fleeting flicker of light inside a locked room. But when you articulate it, when you give it voice, when you translate it into a sincere recognition of another, it becomes an energy with the power to ripple outwards, to heal, to connect, and to change the very fabric of the space you inhabit. You not only make the recipient feel seen, validated, and valued, but you also awaken in them a deeper sense of their own connection and their own appreciation for life. This is the principle of emotional contagion. A well-documented phenomenon in social psychology. Human beings are not emotional islands. We are porous, constantly and often unconsciously absorbing and mirroring the emotional states of those around us. This process is mediated by our mirror neuron system, the part of the brain that allows for empathy and social learning. When you express genuine gratitude, your positive, open, emotional state, conveyed through your tone of voice, your facial expression, your body language, is quite literally mirrored in the brain of the other person, triggering a corresponding positive emotional state in them. You're not just being kind, you're initiating a positive feedback loop, a biological and social domino effect. Gratitude, therefore, has the power to heal not just the giver, but also the receiver. It creates a shared space of psychological safety, a pocket of shared humanity where two people can both feel, for a moment, that they are living with meaning and that their contributions matter. A well-timed and sincere thank you, a small but specific gesture of recognition, a warm and appreciative glance in place of words that have been too long forgotten. These may be the only things someone needs on what feels like another ordinary thankless day. When you pause to tell a loved one that you are grateful for their constant, often invisible presence in your life, when you message an old friend to remind them how their support helped you through a tough time, when you quietly repay a past kindness with a new, unspoken gesture. These seemingly small acts are the very things that plant the seeds of lasting bonds, of unbreakable trust, and of a kind of happiness that no longer feels isolated and lonely. In the world of organizational psychology, this is no longer considered a soft skill. It is a hard, strategic asset. Studies from institutions like the Wharton School have shown that a workplace culture where gratitude is regularly and authentically expressed experiences significantly lower employee turnover, higher levels of productivity, and a greater degree of psychological safety. The shared belief that a team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. In such an environment, defensiveness drops, creativity rises, and people feel a stronger, more resilient sense of belonging. You do not need grand, sweeping gestures or expensive corporate programs to begin to change the atmosphere around you. You just need to be the one who begins with a single, specific, and grateful act. The habit of spreading gratitude also dramatically reduces the friction of negative reactions in a conflict. When you approach someone with a genuine acknowledgement of their effort, their perspective, or their positive intent. Before you mention your concern, the entire neurochemical landscape of the conversation changes. You might begin with, "I know you tried your best on this and I'm grateful for the effort," before you mention where an improvement is needed. That way of speaking does not make you weak. On the contrary, it shows that you are strong and emotionally intelligent enough to view situations from multiple angles and to balance your personal feelings with the kindness and respect necessary for healthy, productive communication. Sometimes, the most profound forms of gratitude do not need to be spoken at all. Gratitude lies in the way you listen to someone without interrupting, giving them the rare and precious gift of your full, undivided attention. It lies in remembering a small detail of someone's life, their birthday, or the name of their child without needing a digital reminder. It lies in the simple, powerful choice of gentleness when you have every right and reason to be angry. Every time you act in this way, you're planting the seeds of trust, of connection, of deep and lasting compassion. And it is from those very seeds that a sustainable happiness begins to bloom, not loudly, but steadily and surely. You cannot control how others treat you, but you can always, and in all circumstances, control how you treat them. And if you choose to do so from a place of cultivated gratitude, you will find, with the certainty of a law of nature, that the world begins to respond to you with a very different and more benevolent energy. Not because you have demanded that it change, but because you have created a new, higher standard for yourself. Spreading gratitude does not need an audience. It requires no external recognition. But it is this very absence of expectation, this purity of intent, that makes the resulting happiness all the more profound. You do not give thanks in order to get something back. You do it because it is the kind of person you have chosen to be. And from that single, powerful choice, you begin to build a life where happiness no longer comes from some distant, far-off place, but from the simple, sincere, and meaningful connections you choose to build, day by day. You were not born to be separate. No human being was ever designed to live like an island, a solitary fortress against the world. From the deepest architecture of your biological structure to the intricate wiring of your nervous system, from the microsecond responses in your brain to the deep, ancient emotions in your heart, everything within you is meticulously and irrevocably designed to seek, to build, and to maintain connection, the need to belong, the need to be heard, the need to be truly seen. These are not fleeting emotional cravings or signs of a weak character. They are fundamental, non-negotiable components of how your very brain operates, and no true, sustainable happiness can ever grow in the toxic, barren soil of isolation. A person can succeed in silence. They can appear strong while they are alone, but if they never truly connect with anyone, if they never feel the profound and grounding bond of belonging to another, there will always be a quiet, persistent, and aching void inside. A void that no material achievement, no intellectual rationalization, and no amount of worldly success can ever hope to fill. Many people mistakenly believe that loneliness is merely a transient and unpleasant emotional state, a feeling to be endured or distracted away. But modern science has now proven with terrifying clarity that this is a dangerous and naive misunderstanding. Prolonged loneliness is not just a feeling, it is a physiological disease. It has direct, measurable, and devastating effects on your physical health. Groundbreaking research, including the work of neuroscientist John Cacioppo, a pioneer in the field of social neuroscience, has demonstrated that chronic loneliness acts as a fertile soil for a range of diseases. It significantly weakens the immune system, leaving you more vulnerable to infections. It triggers a chronic inflammatory response throughout the body, a key driver of diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even certain types of cancer. It damages the areas of the brain associated with executive function, motivation, and social bonding. In fact, a landmark meta-analysis of multiple studies concluded that the mortality risk associated with loneliness is equivalent to that of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and even greater than the risks associated with obesity and physical inactivity. Humans do not just want connection, they need it to live meaningfully and healthily. Like plants need light, like a heart needs a steady rhythm, you need someone who can reach into the deepest, most hidden part of your emotions and reflect back your own essence through their presence. Not for the fleeting rush of external validation, but for the profound biological affirmation that you are still a part of something greater than your own solitary self. A community, a family, a friendship, even a fleeting yet sincere connection. And here lies the great and tragic irony of our modern age. We live in the most technologically connected society in human history. Yet we are suffering from an epidemic of profound isolation. Amidst the countless social media platforms, the endless streams of messages, emails, and notifications, we seem to be talking more but understanding less. We interact with a frictionless ease, yet we rarely touch the sacred ground of true, undivided presence. And it is this thin, almost invisible, but dangerously wide gap between interacting and connecting that has created a generation that appears hyper-connected on the surface, but is internally exhausted and starved by loneliness. True happiness cannot be found if you only live inside the echo chamber of your own mind, swirling in a vortex of unshared thoughts and receiving no empathetic response from another living, breathing human being. You do not need hundreds of shallow relationships to feel complete. You need only one deep, authentic connection, one true friendship, one person who listens without the reflex to judge. Sometimes a single moment of sincere, uninterrupted conversation, a single glance filled with genuine understanding, or an unconditional, heartfelt hug can soothe the cavernous emptiness you thought no one could ever see. But to receive that profound gift, you must first have the courage to open up. You cannot truly connect if you are always and forever wearing a mask. No one can reach you if you keep your distance, barricaded behind a wall of pride or a deep-seated fear of getting hurt. True connection begins only in the moment you dare to be honest, when you dare to say that you are tired, that you need someone, that you are not okay, but you are learning to be. It is that very honesty, unperfect and unpolished, that makes others feel safe enough to come close. Because deep down, every human being on this planet is looking for the exact same thing: a place to belong, someone to trust, and a relationship that does not require the exhausting performance of constant strength. You can begin to reweave the threads of your own connection today with simple, almost humble actions. Call a friend you have not spoken to in a while, not with an agenda, but just to hear their voice. Ask a colleague how they are doing, with a genuine care that goes beyond mere social niceties. Truly listen to a family member without interrupting, without planning your rebuttal, without trying to fix them. Each of these acts, though small, helps to repair the delicate social fabric that the frantic pace of modern life has so carelessly unraveled. And it is through those re-established connections that you will begin to feel the vibrant, life-giving current of human experience again, something that simply cannot and will not exist in the sterile vacuum of isolation. No one is strong enough to not need anyone. Real strength lies in the courageous acknowledgement of our fundamental need for connection, without an ounce of shame. The happiest people are not those who close themselves off, who tightly control and manage their every emotion. They are those who have the courage to open up, to build, and to nurture their relationships with a profound and unwavering sincerity, because they understand, on a cellular level, that happiness does not come from the avoidance of vulnerability. It comes from the wise and careful placement of our trust in the right and deserving places. Modern life, in its relentless pursuit of efficiency, has made us increasingly skilled at talking, yet it has systematically stripped us of the sacred and life-giving art of how to truly converse. We exchange terabytes of information. We reply to messages with lightning speed. We update our statuses. We perform our connections for a digital audience. But rarely, if ever, do we actually sit down, look another human being in the eyes, and speak from the quiet, unarmored truth of the heart. In this deafeningly noisy world, a single, sincere conversation has become a radical and precious rarity. But what you may not yet realize is that one such conversation, when offered at the right time, with the right quality of presence, holds within it an almost miraculous power. It can pull a person out of the cold, suffocating prison of their own invisibility. It can rekindle a light they thought had long gone out. It can soothe a soul that is quietly breaking apart in the terrible silence of its own private suffering. The immense power of a sincere conversation does not lie in the number of words spoken, nor in the brilliance of the arguments presented. It lies in the quality of the presence offered. This is the distinction that the philosopher Martin Buber made between an I-it relationship and an I-thou relationship. The vast majority of our modern interactions are I-it. They are transactional. The other person is an object, and it, a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved, an audience to be impressed, an obstacle to be overcome. We are talking at them, not with them, but a true conversation is an I-thou encounter. It is a moment of profound, sacred presence where you set aside your agenda, your ego, and your desire to control the outcome, and you meet the other person in their full, unvarnished humanity. You create a safe, hallowed space where the other person can be themselves, without the exhausting and ever-present fear of being judged, fixed, or hurt. That palpable sense of safety is the very foundation upon which hidden truths are finally spoken, upon which old wounds are finally acknowledged, and upon which true, unbreakable trust begins to return. A real conversation is not a debate. It is not a contest of who is more right or more intellectually informed. It is a shared space where two souls are granted permission to show up in the most honest way possible. When you have the courage to speak your own truth, without embellishment, without evasion, you give the other person the implicit permission to do the same. And when two people dare to lower their armor in this way, what is created is not a fleeting, positive emotion, but a deep and lasting connection. A connection powerful enough to begin to heal wounds you thought had long gone numb. Sometimes, what a person will remember for the rest of their life is not the advice you gave them, but the simple, profound, and unforgettable feeling of being truly and completely heard. In this world, the rarest and most valuable commodity is not money. It is not status. It is not opportunity. It is the full, undivided, and unconditional attention of another human being. When you put down your phone, when you look someone in the eye, and when you truly listen with your entire being, with your heart, with your body, with your soul, you are giving them the most precious gift you have to offer, the gift of your presence. And in that sacred moment, the conversation rises above the mere exchange of words and touches the deepest part of the human spirit. This is not just a poetic idea. It is a biological reality. Your presence, your calm and empathetic voice, directly influences the nervous system of the person you are speaking with. This is the essence of Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. A calm, resonant, and non-judgmental human voice acts as a powerful vagal brake, slowing the other person's heart rate, calming their primal fight-or-flight response, and activating their called social engagement system. You are, quite literally, using your own regulated nervous system to help co-regulate theirs. You're creating a biological state of safety where healing and connection become possible. A sincere conversation can also be a powerful catalyst for self-awareness. When you speak about what you are truly feeling, you are first forced to be honest with yourself, to give name and form to the chaotic currents within. And when you hear someone else share the difficult journey they are going through, you begin to see a world beyond the narrow confines of your own story. You not only understand others better, you come to understand yourself more clearly, your own struggles reflected in their eyes. A conversation, in that sense, is no longer just a social interaction. It becomes a profound form of inner growth, a shared spiritual practice where both people emerge more mature, more compassionate, and more whole than they were before. Sustainable happiness cannot be built in the barren landscape of isolation, nor can it thrive in the shallow soil of superficial relationships. It needs fertile ground in which to take root. And that ground is made of sincere, honest conversations. Conversations where you do not have to strain to impress, where you do not have to hide your real feelings to appear fine, and where you do not need to be perfect to be loved. You just need to have the courage to be real, and the patience to hold the space for the other person to be real too. There are people in this world who carry their pain for years, simply because no one ever asked them the right question, with the right intention. There are those who do not even realize they are lost until they say something out loud for the first time and hear the undeniable truth in their own voice. The right conversation with the right person at the right time can be the turning point of a human life. Not because it magically solves everything, but because it opens a new door in the mind, a door through which someone begins to allow themselves to be real, to feel, and ultimately to change. Whether you are an introvert who draws your energy from the quiet well of solitude, or an extrovert who thrives in the vibrant, kinetic energy of crowds, you cannot, under any circumstances, be truly and sustainably happy without a positive circle of connection. This is not a matter of personality preference. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable law of human flourishing. No one is strong enough to sustainably grow in a perpetually negative environment, and no one is independent enough to not need the presence of people who genuinely inspire, challenge, and support them through the long and often arduous journey of life. The critical question is not what kind of personality you have. It is who you allow into the sacred inner sanctum of your world, and who you permit to stay long enough to shape how you think, how you live, and how you ultimately face the world. A positive circle of connection is not a large, sprawling network filled with the shallow currency of surface-level social ties. It is a meticulously curated mental and emotional ecosystem, a personal cabinet of trusted advisors, where each person's very presence brings with it a palpable sense of peace, of motivation, of wisdom, or of steady, unshakable trust. One person in this circle might be the mirror, helping you to see yourself more honestly, without judgment. Another might be the catalyst, giving you the courageous push to take action when you hesitate. And sometimes, just one single person who truly listens and believes in you, without reservation, is enough to change the entire direction of your life. Introverts are often tragically misunderstood as not needing connection. In truth, they crave deeper, more meaningful relationships more than anyone. They do not want to talk a lot, but they long for conversations that truly matter. They do not enjoy the noise of crowds, but they are deeply and fiercely attached to the few they truly trust. For the introvert, a positive circle does not need to be large. It just needs to be right. They need a few carefully chosen souls who understand the language of silence, who respect the necessity of personal space, and who never pressure them to be someone they are not. Extroverts, on the other hand, while naturally gifted at making friends and connecting with a wide array of people, often fall into the subtle trap of creating large but shallow social circles, where everything revolves around the performance of laughter, the constant hum of activity, and the endless pursuit of surface-level fun. They may know many people, but they can still suffer from a profound lack of being deeply understood. That is why extroverts, too, must learn the difficult but essential discipline of filtering their connections, of actively seeking out those who go beyond the good times and remain as steady, unwavering pillars when everything else falls apart. A positive circle is not measured by the number of friends you have. It is measured by the quality of the energy they bring into your life. To build such a circle, you must have the courage to choose, You cannot keep people around who constantly dismiss your dreams, who question your every effort, or who regularly and habitually spread the poison of negativity and still expect to be happy. This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of social contagion. Just as a virus spreads through a population, so do emotional and behavioral states. The work of social scientists Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler has demonstrated that happiness, obesity, and even smoking habits can spread through social networks up to 3 degrees of separation. You are not just influenced by your friends, but by your friends' friends, and even your friends' friends' friends. Every time you choose to sit with someone who only judges, criticizes, or complains, you're not just having a bad conversation. You're unconsciously allowing them to reprogram your own mindset toward a state of exhaustion, of cynicism, and of limitation. On the other hand, every time you talk to someone who makes you feel stronger, clearer, and more at peace, you are watering the seeds of positivity and resilience inside your own mind. No one can build a positive circle of connection without first starting from within. This is the sociological principle of homophily, the tendency for like to attract like. If you consistently betray your own values just to be liked, you will inevitably attract people who do not truly respect you. If you stay silent to avoid conflict while tolerating what is fundamentally wrong, you will find yourself surrounded by toxic relationships that are held together only by the weak glue of quiet suffering. But when you start living with an unwavering authenticity, when you speak your truth with clarity and kindness, and when you clearly choose what you want to keep in your life, people on that same higher frequency will naturally and inevitably show up. It is not magic, it is resonance. Do not be afraid to shrink your circle if it helps you to breathe easier, to think more clearly, and to live more truthfully. You owe no one your presence if they constantly make you doubt your own worth. You do not have to maintain a relationship just because of a shared past, especially if its present is actively damaging your future. A positive circle requires a quiet and consistent bravery, the courage to let go of those who pull you down, and the clear, focused intention to seek out those who lift you up. True positivity does not come from people who are always cheerful or who only say pretty, pleasing things. It comes from a foundation of honesty. It comes from genuine, undivided presence. It comes from the way someone cares without performing. They may be direct in their feedback, but they never seek to harm you. They may be quiet, but they are always there. And above all, they never make you feel like you have to exhaust yourself trying to be worthy of their love. If you do not yet have that kind of circle, you must begin building it today. Notice who makes you feel lighter, more expansive after each interaction. Cherish and invest more of your precious time and energy in the relationships that give you the room to grow, instead of suffocating you with their outdated expectations. Be the one who brings the positive, grounded energy first, and you will be surprised how people with that same rare energy begin to appear, quietly but genuinely, in your life. Happiness is not a destination. It is the journey, and more importantly, it is who you're walking that journey with. And sometimes, just walking beside the right person is enough to change the whole world. Big achievements draw the admiration of the world. But it is the quiet, persistent, almost invisible accumulation of small wins, repeated day after weary day, that truly and fundamentally shapes a happy life. The grand achievements may be the events that are celebrated, the moments recorded on performance boards or broadcast on social media, but the small wins, like the choice to wake up a little earlier than yesterday, the quiet satisfaction of completing a task you have long postponed, the simple act of saying no to a familiar, self-destructive temptation. These go almost entirely unnoticed. No one sees them. No one applauds them. Only you know they happened. Yet it is in those very moments, the moments when you choose what is right over what is easy, that you are giving yourself the most subtle yet most profound form of trust imaginable. The quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are in control of your own life. This is not a feel-good platitude. It is a fundamental law of human motivation, a law identified by researchers at Harvard Business School as the progress principle. In one of the most extensive studies of its kind, researchers Teresa Amabila and Stephen Kramer analyzed nearly 12,000 daily journal entries from hundreds of employees. They were searching for the single biggest driver of a positive inner work life, the confluence of positive emotions, strong motivation, and favorable perceptions of one's work. The answer was not recognition, it was not interpersonal support, it was not even clear goals. The single most powerful factor was making progress in meaningful work. And crucially, this progress did not have to be a monumental breakthrough. The study found that even small incremental wins, or small wins, had a disproportionately positive and powerful effect on a person's inner state. This is the great secret that happy, productive people have intuitively understood for centuries. Happiness is not a prize you win at the end of a long race. It is the fuel you generate with every small step you take along the way. Many people, however, live their entire lives in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the rare thunderous moments of triumph to finally grant them permission to feel happy. A promotion, a salary raise, buying a house, succeeding in a major project. But if you tether your entire emotional well-being to these rare and often unpredictable moments, you're condemning yourself to a life where the vast majority of your time is spent in a state of quiet, gnawing disappointment. Because big achievements, by their very nature, take time. They require a long, arduous, and often thankless process, and they frequently arrive much slower than we expect. Happiness, on the other hand, if you only know how to look for it, can be found right now, in this very moment, in every small, courageous win you strive for during the course of an ordinary day. Small wins do not change the world in an instant, but they do change you. They are the antidote to the paralyzing venom of procrastination. They are the building blocks of endurance and self-respect. Most importantly, they are the engine of positive momentum, creating a neurological feedback loop that helps you believe that you can, in fact, keep going. Every time you complete a small, intentional task, your brain releases a small but significant surge of dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation and reward. This is not just a fleeting feeling of satisfaction. It is a powerful chemical signal that trains your brain, reinforcing the neural pathway associated with that successful action. The more small wins you accumulate, the more your brain begins to crave that feeling of accomplishment, making it neurologically easier to tackle the next task and the next. This is how real, sustainable momentum is built. It is not a tidal wave of initial, heroic motivation. It is the steady, ever-increasing flow of a river, carved by the consistent accumulation of small victories. The most common and tragic trap of the perfectionist is the sentence that begins, "I'll be happy when," and that sentence never, ever ends. When one goal is achieved, another, more distant one, immediately arises. When one milestone is reached, it suddenly feels insufficient, its joy fleeting and hollow. But this is a cognitive error, a form of all-or-nothing thinking that perpetually postpones joy and creates a chronic sense of dissatisfaction. If you learn to acknowledge and celebrate every small step you take, you will no longer be haunted by the crushing pressure to always be exceptional. You will begin to live with a deep and profound appreciation for each part of the process, for each decision, for each ounce of effort, even if no one but you is ever aware of it. One finished, well-crafted page of a book. One difficult call you finally made. One time you chose to clean your desk instead of delaying it yet again. One healthy meal you chose with intention instead of giving in to a rushed, mindless impulse. All of these are steps forward, and when you learn to recognize them as such, you start to feel a quiet pride in yourself. Not because you're better than others, but because you're being kind, honest, and disciplined with your own journey. If you observe the people in your life who smile often, who encourage others, who seem to maintain a lasting and grounded sense of peace, you will usually find they are not the ones living the most extravagant or dramatic lives. They are the ones who have mastered the quiet art of savoring the small wins of each day. They give themselves credit for keeping their calm in a moment of anger. They acknowledge their own efforts, even when no one else cheers them on. They build their joy not from the flashy external things, but from the seemingly small internal moments that, when accumulated, form a strong, resilient, and grounded inner spirit. You too can start again today. Instead of waiting for a big achievement, define one small, achievable win for yourself for the rest of this day. Something entirely within your control. And when you complete it, you must not brush it off as nothing. You must pause for even a single, conscious second and acknowledge it. Be thankful for your own effort. This act of acknowledgement is what closes the loop, what solidifies the dopamine reward, and what tells your subconscious mind, we are winning. You do not need to do something extraordinary to feel worthy. You just need to persist in doing what is right every single day. And then the small wins will accumulate into big changes. Your confidence will not come from short, sporadic bursts of success, but from the deep, ingrained habit of not giving up on the things that seem trivial. And at some point, when you look back, you will be amazed at how far you have come. Not because your journey was fast, but because it was deep. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Happiness doesn't wait at the finish line. It is present in every small, courageous step you take if you are only mindful enough to see it. Every single action you repeat each day, no matter how small or how seemingly unnoticed it may be, is a brick you are quietly and deliberately placing in the foundation of your life. It is not the explosive, headline-grabbing moments or the grand, life-altering decisions, but the silent, relentless, and repeated daily choices that ultimately shape a person's mindset, forging it into a structure that is either grounded and unshakable from within, or brittle and fragile in the face of the first real challenge. A person does not suddenly, magically become strong. Just as a great wall cannot stand firm against the siege of time without a foundation built from countless, patiently laid bricks, so too can your character not endure without a similar construction. Every single time you choose persistence over the sweet surrender of giving up, every time you choose to wake early over the seductive comfort of sleeping in, every time you choose to read a book over the mindless, dopamine-fueled scrolling, every time you choose to hold your words in a moment of anger instead of lashing out, in each of these moments, you're laying another brick. A brick for self-control, a brick for resilience, a brick for a deep and lasting internal endurance. And likewise, with equal and opposite force, each time you choose laziness, each time you choose to compromise your own standards, each time you choose the comfortable path of procrastination or the self-serving logic of an excuse, you're not just failing to build. You're actively removing a brick, systematically weakening the very structure you're trying to create. People do not collapse because of a single, overwhelming crisis. They collapse because they have not, over the long and quiet years, built a strong enough inner foundation to withstand the inevitable pressure when it comes. Life makes no promise of constant peace. The storms will come for you as they come for us all. But if you have meticulously constructed your inner structure with the mortar of discipline, with the alignment of integrity, with the strength of intentional action, and with the reinforcement of positive daily habits, then even in the heart of the hurricane you can, and you will, remain standing. Not because you're somehow better or luckier than others, but because you have made yourself reliable to yourself. You have built a citadel of character. This is the principle of compounding character. In finance, a small sum of money, invested with unwavering discipline, compounds over time into a vast fortune. The growth in the later years is not linear. It is exponential, feeding upon all the accumulated growth that came before. Your character operates under this exact same mathematical law. Each small, positive action is a tiny deposit into your account of inner strength. In the moment, it seems to accomplish nothing. But over years, these deposits begin to compound, creating a formidable and almost unshakable reservoir of resilience that you can draw upon in times of crisis. These small, daily actions are not meaningless rituals. They are the fundamental mechanics of building character. You do not need an endless library of philosophical theories to change your life. You need only a short, non-negotiable list of small things you commit to doing, day in and day out, and then you must carry them out with an uncompromising, almost monastic consistency. We live in a culture that tragically overestimates the power of a single moment of inspiration and criminally underestimates the profound, earth-moving power of a daily habit. Inspiration is the brilliant flash of lightning in a storm. It is powerful, it is dramatic, and it illuminates everything for a breathtaking second. But it is gone just as quickly as it arrives. A habit, on the other hand, is the slow, inexorable, and almost invisible grinding of tectonic plates. It is not dramatic, it is not exciting. But over time, it has the power to build mountains. Never underestimate the cumulative power of the small. One single, misaligned brick can, over time, cause an entire wall to tilt and eventually collapse. One single, wrong, repeated action, one daily choice for comfort over discipline, can form a negative habit that will pull you, with the force of gravity, away from the truest and highest version of yourself. But if you have the discipline to adjust each brick, to refine each daily behavior, and to do each small thing properly and with intention, then over time, you will build a self that nothing in this world can ever truly break. This is not a metaphor. It is a literal, neurological process. Every single time you repeat an intentional action, you're strengthening the neural pathway associated with that behavior. You're wrapping that pathway in a fatty sheath called myelin, which makes the electrical signal travel faster and more efficiently. Each repeated action becomes a new fold in the intricate origami of your brain. Each fold, over time, gradually shapes the default operating system of your mind, and it is that very system that governs how you make decisions, how you handle pressure, how you manage your emotions, and how you define your core values. You are, in the most literal sense, the architect of your own brain. Stability, therefore, is not a feeling you wait for. It is an outcome you build. It is the hard-won result of thousands of small, courageous, and often unnoticed actions you have consistently chosen, done, and lived, without anyone forcing you, and without anyone needing to see. And if today you feel unsteady, if you feel fragile and ungrounded, do not look for some grand external event to rescue you. Return to the small things, the things you can do, right here, right now. That is where you will find your sense of control. That is where you will find your stability. That is where you will find your power. A person can lose their direction in life, but they will never be completely and truly lost if they continue to practice a single positive habit, no matter how small. Because that one single action is the signal. It is the proof that the fire within is still burning. And as long as you keep choosing to lay one right brick each and every day, you are still building. Emotions are a form of energy, and like all energy in the universe, they cannot simply be created or destroyed. They must be transformed. When you hold on to a heavy emotion like sadness for too long, without giving it a voice, a channel for release, or the simple dignity of your own compassionate attention, your physical body becomes a pressurized container for that unresolved tension. The unspoken grief, the unexpressed anger, the gnawing anxiety, these are not just abstract feelings, they are physiological events. That unresolved tension imprints itself on the very rhythm of your heartbeat, on the shallow pattern of your breath, on the quality of your sleep, and even on the intricate chemistry of your thinking. You cannot hope to think positively when your body is physically and biologically stuck in a negative state. You cannot hope to find a lasting sense of peace when your mind is racing, untethered from the grounding reality of your own physical form. And this is where we must turn to the oldest, most powerful, and most tragically forgotten self-healing mechanism that human beings possess: movement. You do not need to become a professional athlete. You do not need an expensive gym membership or the endurance to run a marathon. You simply need to move your body with intention, to walk, to stretch, to gently rotate your limbs, to stand under the open sky and breathe deeply, feeling the air fill your lungs. Every single one of these motions is a message, a powerful and undeniable signal you are sending to your entire nervous system. It is a declaration that says, "I have not fallen. I am still alive. I have the power to shift my own state." And as your body begins to move, as the stagnant energy begins to circulate, the frozen, constricted flow of your emotions starts to find its path again. This is not a metaphor. It is a biochemical reality. Physical movement helps to metabolize and flush out the excess stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that keep you trapped in a state of fight or flight. At the same time, it triggers the release of endorphins, your body's natural opiates, which create a sense of well-being and act as a potent, natural painkiller. But movement alone, if it is mindless, is not enough. If you use movement as a form of escape, burying yourself in a frantic workout or an endless stream of work as a way to avoid feeling your emotions, you are merely filling the void temporarily. You are not healing it. That is why true, lasting transformation requires that movement must be paired with its indispensable partner: mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ancient and profound art of being fully and completely present in each action, in each breath, in each step. When you walk, and you know that you are walking, feeling the sensation of your feet on the ground. When you inhale, and you're intimately aware of the feeling of the air entering your body. When you're washing the dishes, cleaning the floor, or cooking a meal, and you do so with your full, undivided attention. In these moments, these activities cease to be mundane, daily chores. They become sacred rituals of healing. The combination of movement and mindfulness is like a perfectly synchronized duo. One is the physical flow, unlocking the body. The other is the conscious stream, grounding the mind. When both are in motion, you're no longer being violently pulled into the regrets of the past or anxiously leaping into the fears of the future. You are here. You are now. You are living. And it is that simple, profound state of presence that becomes the true and unshakable anchor, the thing that keeps you steady and centered through any of life's inevitable upheavals. The scientific evidence for this partnership is now overwhelming. People who engage in regular, light, mindful movement, such as walking, yoga, or even just the simple act of standing up and moving every 90 minutes, experience significantly lower levels of stress, deeper and more restorative sleep, and a much faster rate of mental and emotional recovery after a setback. When movement is paired with mindfulness, you're not just calming your body, you're fundamentally reestablishing your relationship with yourself. You stop running from your emotions and begin to learn how to listen to them. You stop trying to force your mind into submission and begin to learn how to regulate it with a gentle and compassionate hand. In life's stormiest, most overwhelming moments, our first instinct is often to try to control the external situation, to think our way out of the problem. But what truly needs to be controlled is not the circumstance itself. It is your own inner response. And to develop that level of control, you must train yourself to reconnect with your body, not through force, but through intentional movement infused with awareness. The next time you feel overwhelmed, instead of tensing up, instead of forcing yourself to think positively, I want you to try this. Stand up, step outside if you can, and just walk slowly in silence. Do not try to solve the problem. Do not try to analyze it. Let your body lead. You will be surprised at how, after just a few minutes of this mindful movement, your mind will offer you a new perspective, a clearer path, not because the situation has changed, but because you're no longer reacting from a place of primal fear. You are responding from a place of grounded clarity. Happiness is not found in the complete absence of trouble. It is found in your ability to remain steady within yourself when things no longer go your way. And to build that profound and lasting steadiness, you cannot just read books or follow abstract advice. You need to do something with your body, consciously. You need to create moments throughout your day where you intentionally and deliberately reconnect with your breath, with your movement, and with the simple, miraculous fact of the life flowing through you. That is how you learn to withstand the storm, not through the brute force of resistance, but through the soft, adaptable, and infinitely more powerful strength of presence and adjustment. You do not need to meditate for hours. You do not need to train like an athlete. But you do need to make a solemn promise to yourself that each and every day, no matter how busy you are, you will spend at least 10 minutes moving with awareness. In a chaotic and ungrounded world, the sacred duo of movement and mindfulness is the anchor that will keep your inner ship from drifting. You do not need lofty philosophies. You do not need loud, dramatic solutions. You just need to return to yourself, one step, one breath at a time. And there you will find all the grounding you ever need to pass through any storm life sends your way. You do not need to sit cross-legged in a silent, secluded room, hold your breath until your lungs ache, or wage a futile and exhausting war to suppress your own thoughts in order to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is not some advanced, esoteric technique reserved for monks and mystics. It is the simple, profound, and radical ability to live fully in the only moment that truly exists, the present. It is the capacity to be genuinely present in your actions, in your emotions, and in your breath, without being swept away by the relentless and chaotic currents of everything else. It is not a state of blissful emptiness or a cognitive blankness. It is, in fact, the opposite, a state of heightened, crystal-clear awareness, a state where you can see everything that is happening, both inside and outside of you, without getting hopelessly entangled and carried away by it. Mindfulness is the moment you drink a glass of water and you can clearly and distinctly feel the coolness flowing down your throat. It is the moment you're washing your hands and you're intimately aware of the sensation of the water touching your skin. It is the moment you are in a conversation and you're listening not to formulate your next reply, but to truly and deeply understand what the other person is saying. It is the state of presence, without distraction, without haste, and without the deadening hum of the autopilot that governs most of our lives. The modern human is tragically lost in the cult of speed. Every action has become a rushed, unconscious reflex. Every quiet emotion is immediately covered over by a new layer of constant, digital distraction. You open your phone without remembering why you picked it up. You eat a meal without ever truly knowing whether the food tastes good. You listen to someone you love share their feelings, but your mind is a million miles away, already thinking about an unsent email or a future appointment. This chronic absence of mindfulness does not weaken you instantly, but it gradually and systematically erodes your awareness. It severs the sacred connection between you and your own lived experience. And from that profound disconnection, happiness itself becomes abstract, distant, and theoretical. Not because it is not there, but because you have lost the very faculty required to feel it. Mindfulness does not require you to do more. On the contrary, it asks you to pause, however briefly, in whatever you're doing, and to truly feel it. Not to do it faster, but to do it more deeply. Not to live more hurriedly, but to live more intentionally. To understand the power of this practice, you must first understand the default state of your own brain. Neuroscientists have identified a specific network of brain regions known as the default mode network, DMN. This is the network that becomes active when your mind is not focused on a specific external task. It is the source of your mind wandering, your daydreams, your self-referential thoughts, and your constant looping narratives about the past and the future. The DMN is what relentlessly pulls your mind back into the past, forcing you to ruminate on old regrets, on past mistakes, on lingering guilt, and it is what violently flings your mind into the future, creating endless scenarios of worry, of insecurity, and of vague, free-floating anxiety. And it is in this process, this constant oscillation between the tyranny of the past and the phantom of the future, that the only real moment you ever have, the present, is stolen from you, passes by like a priceless fragment of time that no one ever truly touches. Mindfulness is the scientifically proven practice of consciously disengaging from the default mode network and activating the brain's task-positive network, the network associated with focused, present moment awareness. It is the act of becoming the master of your own attention, rather than the slave of your own thoughts. You do not need to eliminate every thought to be mindful. You only need to recognize that the thoughts are there and then choose not to follow them down their familiar, well-worn paths. When a thought arises, you do not have to judge it. You do not have to fight it. You do not have to push it away. You can simply, with a gentle and non-judgmental curiosity, tell yourself, "Ah, there is a thought," and then, with a quiet and firm intention, you return your focus to your breath, to your step, to whatever it is you're doing in this present moment. The more you practice this simple act of noticing and returning, the more you build your inner freedom. You're no longer being violently manipulated by every passing emotion, no longer controlled by a chaotic and undisciplined mind. You will feel, with a growing sense of clarity, that you're no longer being swept away by everything that happens, but are instead choosing, with intention and with grace, how you respond. Mindfulness is the anchor that keeps the ship of your heart steady in the turbulent waves of information and emotion. It helps you to recognize when you are reacting unconsciously, when you're being pulled by an old fear, when you're losing your connection with your own truest self. And once you have noticed that you have drifted, you always have the power to return. You do not need to change your entire life. Happiness does not come from the arrival of grand external events, but from the quality of the experience you have in each small, ordinary moment. And mindfulness is the master key that unlocks that quality. When you live mindfully, you taste your food better, you sleep more deeply, you love more sincerely, and you work more creatively. Not because the outside world has magically changed, but because you have fundamentally changed your approach from within. You're no longer someone desperately chasing after everything, but someone who is living with everything, fully and completely. No one can live mindfully 24 hours a day. But if you can pause just 3 times a day, once in the morning when you wake, once at lunch while you eat, and once at night before you sleep, and ask yourself the simple, profound question, "Am I truly present right now?" Then you have already begun the sacred journey back to yourself. A journey that does not require much theory, does not demand special skills. All it needs is your unwavering commitment to be real with this moment. You do not see life as it is. You see it as you are. You see it through a unique and complex lens, a lens that has been meticulously ground and polished by the accumulated dust of your experiences, your wounds, your expectations, your deepest fears, and the silent, powerful beliefs you unconsciously carry from your past. The very same external event can occur for 2 different people, and they will experience 2 completely different realities. To one person, a sudden job loss is a catastrophic failure, a final and damning verdict on their worth. To another, that same event is a liberation, a long-awaited and necessary redirection, an opportunity to finally build something new. The event itself was neutral. It was a blank slate. The difference in outcome was not in the world. It was in the lens. And when you finally, truly, and irrevocably understand that you have the power to change this lens, you do not just shift how you feel about a given situation. You transform the entire energy you bring into your life, and, by extension, the very reality that life reflects back to you. This is not a modern self-help platitude. It is one of the most ancient and powerful truths of human wisdom, a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, articulated over 2,000 years ago by the Greek philosopher Epictetus. He stated, with a clarity that cuts through the ages, Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. An event, in and of itself, is not inherently positive or negative until you, and you alone, assign it a label. Life does not intend to hurt you. The universe does not deliberately hand out injustice. Life simply is. It reflects, with a perfect and impartial accuracy, the energy and the interpretation you bring to it. If you choose to see everything through the dark, distorted lens of a victim's mindset, you will find an endless supply of evidence to confirm that the world is unfair, that people are cruel, and that you are powerless. But if you have the courage to consciously and deliberately adopt the lens of a creator, you will begin to view every single challenge not as a barrier, but as raw material, as an opportunity to develop a quality within yourself you never knew you had. The fundamental change does not begin when the outside world finally transforms to meet your demands. It begins in the quiet, sacred, and sovereign moment you decide you are brave enough to shift how you perceive that world. Now, changing your perspective does not mean engaging in a naive denial of reality or a shallow sugarcoating of genuine pain. It means choosing to see things with a wider, deeper, and more empowered eye, from a higher level of awareness. It is the moment you stop asking the powerless, backward-looking question, "Why is this happening to me?" And you start asking the creative, forward-looking question, "What can I learn from this? What does this situation now make possible?" It is the moment you stop blaming external forces and begin taking radical, 100% responsibility for your own emotional state. Because when you no longer demand that the world must change first for you to be happy, that is the precise moment you reclaim your true and ultimate power over your own life. To grasp the sheer, world-altering power of this principle, we must look to one of the most extreme examples in human history, the story of Viktor Frankl. A psychiatrist imprisoned in the Nazi concentration camps of Auschwitz and Dachau, Frankl was stripped of everything a human being can lose: his family, his home, his possessions, his manuscript, his very name, which was replaced with a number tattooed on his arm. He lived in conditions of unimaginable horror, starvation, and constant, imminent death. And yet, it was there, in the deepest pit of human suffering, that he made a discovery that would change the course of modern psychology. He realized that even when his captors controlled every aspect of his physical existence, there was one thing, and one thing only, that they could never take from him: the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. While others around him succumbed to despair, Frankl chose to find meaning. He chose to see his suffering not as a random, meaningless cruelty, but as a test of his inner strength, an opportunity to study the human spirit under extreme duress. He began to secretly reconstruct his life's work in his mind. He would imagine himself in the future, standing in a warm, well-lit lecture hall, teaching his students about the psychology of the concentration camp, using his present suffering as the data for his future contribution. This was not a denial of his reality. It was a radical reinterpretation of it. He did not change the facts of his situation, but he changed the meaning. And in changing the meaning, he found the will to survive. This is the very essence of what is now a cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a technique known as cognitive reappraisal, or reframing. It is the learnable skill of changing the trajectory of an emotional response by changing the initial interpretation of the situation. Every time you change your perspective, you're not just thinking a happier thought, you're physically rewriting the script of your life. A rejection can be the final, painful ending if you see it as a failure. But it can also be the necessary and clarifying turning point if you view it as a redirection, guiding you to a better, more aligned path. A broken relationship can make you feel abandoned and worthless. Or it can be the very event that helps you finally realize you need to learn how to love yourself before expecting anyone else to love you properly. Every single experience is a teacher, if only you are willing to become the student. And the first step to learning is to see things differently. The deepest transformations in life do not come from doing more, but from seeing more clearly. When you change how you view someone, you change how you respond to them. When you change how you see yourself, you change how you live each day. And when you change how you see adversity, you no longer fear it. You begin to walk through it with a quiet, humble, and yet unwavering strength. No one can control everything that happens to them. Accidents, losses, misunderstandings, failures, these are not aberrations. They are the inevitable, non-negotiable, and often painful parts of any life fully lived. But what truly and fundamentally makes the difference between a person who collapses under the weight of these events and a person who grows stronger from them is not the nature of the event itself. It is the quality of their response, because it is your response, and your response alone, that shapes your emotional experience, not the external event. Some people encounter a minor, trivial obstacle, a traffic jam, a spilled coffee, and they immediately complain, surrender their peace, and allow the incident to poison their entire day. Others face a profound and devastating loss, the failure of a business, the end of a relationship, a serious health diagnosis, and yet they remain calm, they restructure their world, and they move forward with a quiet and formidable grace. Their minds are not biologically stronger or somehow immune to pain. They simply differ in one key and ultimately decisive aspect. They have mastered the sacred and sovereign ability to choose their response. Happiness, therefore, does not come from the naive and ultimately futile attempt to avoid all risks, to build a fortress so high that no arrow of misfortune can ever reach you. It comes from the deliberate and disciplined training of an inner strength so resilient, so adaptable, that no matter what happens, you know with an unshakable certainty that you have the power to redefine its meaning. You cannot choose every event that life will throw at you, but you can, always and in all circumstances, choose the meaning you assign to it. And it is from that chosen meaning, and only from that meaning, that your emotions are born. A criticism can be a vicious, personal insult if you allow your pride to take over and interpret it as such. But that same criticism can also be a valuable, if poorly delivered, piece of guidance, if you can set your ego aside and see it with the cool, dispassionate maturity of a student. The end of a relationship can be an agonizing story of suffering and abandonment if you choose to cling to what was lost. But it can also be a story of liberation and necessary cleansing if you see it as the event that finally cleared the path for you to move forward. You have the power to turn a negative event into the very foundation of your future strength if, and only if, you are brave enough not to react from the shallow, well-worn grooves of your old habits. This is the very heart of Viktor Frankl's great discovery in the concentration camps. It is a space that exists between stimulus and response. In that space lies our power to choose, and in our choice lies our growth and our freedom. Your first, instantaneous gut reaction to an event does not reflect your true nature. It reflects the pre-programmed ancient habits of your nervous system. It is the amygdala, your primal brain, screaming, "Threat." But your second reaction, the one that comes in the quiet, sacred moment after. You pause, after you look deeply into what has just happened, and after you consciously and deliberately choose your response. That is the moment you truly begin to take control of your life. Because from that moment on, you're no longer living by the blind tyranny of instinct, but by the clear, illuminating light of your own awareness. When something happens in the world, it carries with it no inherent objective emotion. But how you choose to interpret it will determine the entire mental and emotional state you carry with you through the rest of your day. And if you do not learn to consciously manage that process of interpretation, you will live your whole life being dragged around like a puppet on a string by other people's emotions, by their actions, and by the chaotic randomness of the external environment. You become a victim, not because life is fundamentally unfair, but because you have never stopped to ask yourself the most powerful question a human can ask. Can I respond differently? That question, simple but revolutionary, is the starting point for all inner happiness. It is the key that liberates your mind from the prison of its own automatic, unthinking reactions. No one forces you to be angry when you're insulted. No one compels you to be anxious in the face of risk. No one makes you feel sad when you fail. You just react that way because you have been conditioned over years and years to do so. But any reaction, no matter how deeply ingrained, can be retrained if you are willing to patiently and consistently practice the power of choice. Every time something triggers you, you have a sacred opportunity. Pause. Do not speak too soon. Do not decide too quickly. Do not label the situation too fast. Just pause. Take one single, deep, conscious breath. And in that precious space you have just created, ask yourself, is this reaction truly taking me where I want to go? And if the answer is no, then you have the right and the responsibility to choose again. And here is something truly interesting. When you begin to change how you respond, you also, over time, begin to change how others treat you. Because the world, in its infinite complexity, always and inevitably reflects back to you the energy you emit. A person who angers easily will consistently attract frustrating and infuriating situations. A person who remains calm and grounded, even in the face of provocation, will influence their surroundings to adjust to them. Not because the world magically favors them, but because they have fundamentally changed their core energetic signature. A truly mature person is not someone who never gets angry or confused. It is someone who knows when to stop, so as not to let their initial reaction destroy something of value. Someone who recognizes their own emotions rising, but does not have to act on them. Someone who does not turn their anger into hurtful words or their fear into impulsive, self-sabotaging decisions. Someone who can sit in the heart of the storm and yet maintain a pocket of stillness within. And it is in that stillness that true, unshakable inner strength is formed. Lasting happiness is not found in the fantasy of ideal circumstances. It lies in your hard-won ability to remain steady in imperfect ones. A busy day will not exhaust you if you do not meet it with irritation. A criticism will not break you if you do not allow it to define your worth. A crisis will not make you lose control if you see it as just one more part of a larger, more meaningful journey. Everything is about your response, and you can relearn how to respond at any moment you choose. People often think that a life purpose must be something grand, something extraordinary, something that changes the entire world, leaves a historic legacy, or involves doing something so special that millions will remember your name. But it is exactly this crushing and culturally ingrained expectation that leaves so many people feeling confused, exhausted, and hopelessly lost, because they believe that if they have not yet found that one singular, great thing, they must be living their lives wrongly. The truth, however, is much simpler, much quieter, and infinitely more profound. A life purpose is not about discovering something huge and monumental. It is about cultivating anything, no matter how small, that makes you feel that your life is more meaningful each and every day. If, every morning, you wake up and you know why you're getting out of bed, you have already touched the very core of what it means to live with purpose. This modern obsession with a grand, singular purpose is a relatively recent invention, a byproduct of an individualistic culture that glorifies the lone genius, the revolutionary CEO, the world-changing artist. It creates a form of purpose anxiety, a chronic and gnawing feeling that your ordinary life is somehow insufficient. This is a dangerous spiritual disease, because in the relentless search for an extraordinary future, we tragically lose our ability to find meaning in our ordinary present. In contrast, many ancient wisdom traditions, from the Stoicism of Marcus Aurelius to the Zen Buddhism of Thich Nhat Hanh, teach the opposite. They teach that purpose is not a destination to be found, but a quality of presence to be cultivated. It is not what you do, but how you do what you do. Not everyone is born to invent a new technology, to lead a nation, or to create a sweeping ideology that changes the course of history. But everyone, without exception, can live purposefully by discovering what makes them feel truly and authentically alive, instead of just surviving. It could be the sacred, often thankless act of caring for an ill-loved one. It could be the profound and generational work of raising a kind-hearted child. It could be the quiet contribution of running a small bookstore that spreads knowledge and light in a local community. Or it could simply be the disciplined and honorable act of living each day in a way that you will not regret when the night falls. Purpose is not, and never has been, measured by its external scale. It is measured only by the sense of fullness you feel on the inside. No one but you can define what your life purpose is, because it is not mapped out on some preordained career plan. It is not hidden in someone else's well-meaning advice, and it is certainly not waiting for you at the end of some long and arduous journey of success. It has, more often than not, been there all along, in the quiet, almost forgotten moments when you have felt most truly and completely alive. In the activities that make you lose all track of time, a psychological state known as flow. In the things you do not for any external reward, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because you feel you can't not do them. What is it that moves your heart into a state of quiet, profound emotion? What would you willingly sacrifice your time and your energy for without any hesitation or need for external validation? That is where you should begin to look. Many people spend their entire lives chasing what they think is their purpose, only to drift further and further away from any true sense of inner connection. They chase fame, they chase power, they chase achievements, and then, at some point, often at the very pinnacle of their success, they feel a crushing and inexplicable emptiness because they no longer know why they even started. They have successfully lived a life based on what others call success, and in the process, they have forgotten what gives them a personal sense of meaning. Because real, lasting purpose is not what makes others applaud you. It is what makes you want to continue, even when no one is clapping. someone who sweeps their neighborhood each morning, not for pay, but out of a deep and quiet love for the cleanliness and peace of their community, is living a life no less purposeful than that of a renowned scientist. Someone who pours their entire presence and love into the preparation of their family's meals is living no less purposefully than someone working in a high-powered international organization. Because again, it is not about what you do, it is about how you do it. If there is love, if there is dedication, and if there is a genuine sense of contribution, then any action, no matter how humble, can become an expression of the deepest and most profound purpose. Living with purpose is not a journey to find some ultimate, final destination. It is the daily, moment-to-moment choice to live meaningfully. It is knowing that everything you do, even the smallest, most invisible act, contributes to something bigger than yourself, even if you do not see it immediately. It is understanding that being fully present in a conversation, that helping someone when they are in need, or that planting a single seed of hope in another's heart is also an integral part of a deeply meaningful life. When you begin to live like that, you no longer need to search for your purpose because you are already living it. Every person has a deep, primal instinct to contribute. But many misunderstand contribution as needing to do something grand. In truth, what this world needs is not another empty symbol of success. It needs more people who live kindly, who live deeply, and who live with a full and undivided presence. People who live not to prove, but to connect. Not to win, but to radiate. Not to conquer, but to nourish. And you can absolutely be that kind of person if you just stop searching for your purpose somewhere out there and begin to live purposefully from right here today. You will know you are living right when you feel full on the inside, even when the outside world is quiet. When you no longer need to boast about anything because you feel a profound sense of peace in your simple daily actions. When you are no longer haunted by the neurotic need to do something big, but simply want to live kindly with what you have. That is when purpose is no longer a vague, abstract concept, but becomes a steady, silent, and unwavering rhythm that guides you each and every day. Many people feel utterly lost in their lives, not because they have nothing in their hands, but because they have fallen victim to a grand and crippling illusion, the belief that unless they achieve something monumental, everything they are currently doing is fundamentally meaningless. But it is precisely this toxic belief, this relentless and unforgiving internal comparison against an imaginary grandiose ideal, that systematically erodes their sense of value, day by day, moment by moment. Because true, sustainable purpose is not a dazzling milestone waiting for you at the distant end of the road. It is the very quality of presence you touch every single time you choose to do the right thing, even, and especially, when no one sees it. The purpose of your life does not lie in the external scale of the act. It lies only in the depth of the intention you bring into the smallest, most ordinary details. A heartfelt, fully present check-in with a friend who is struggling. A moment of superhuman patience with someone who is lost in their own pain. The simple, disciplined act of being fully present in a conversation without the twitching, ever-present urge to look at your phone. All of these, when done with a full and sincere awareness, carry a profound and sacred purpose. The ancient Greek philosophers, most notably Aristotle, had a word for this concept: telos. The telos of a thing is its inherent purpose, its end, its ultimate reason for being. The telos of an acorn is to become a mighty oak tree. The telos of a knife is to cut cleanly. Aristotle argued that the telos of a human being is to live a life of eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or living well and doing well. But he did not see this as the achievement of some grand external destiny. He saw it as the excellent performance of one's unique human function, moment by moment. You do not find your purpose by searching for a magnificent, preordained role in the great play of the cosmos. You find it by choosing to perform your current, ordinary role with an extraordinary degree of excellence, with virtue, and with your full presence. A person who listens with their whole heart, without the distracting filter of their own ego and judgment, is doing something more transformative, more healing, and more purposeful than the delivery of 1,000 grand, empty speeches. Someone who cleans a small corner of their home, not as a chore, but out of a deep and quiet respect for their living space, is embodying a philosophy of order and intention worthy of the deepest admiration. Purpose does not need to be hung on a wall like a corporate mission statement. It needs to be breathed silently and consistently into your everyday actions. Wise people do not wait until they have enough time, enough money, or a set of ideal, perfect circumstances to finally begin living with purpose. They begin with what is closest, with what is right in front of them today. They know that if they wait for some special occasion to be kind, to be devoted, to live with meaning, they are letting the very substance of their life slip by, leaving nothing behind but a dusty trail of postponements and good intentions. The way you choose to greet the morning, the way you respond to a small, unexpected frustration, the way you act when you believe no one is watching, that is the true and only measure of the purpose you are actually living. Because what cannot be repeated and sustained in the small, ordinary things will never be strong enough to last in the big, extraordinary ones. You do not need a stage. You need only a clear and unwavering intention, and that intention can be planted, like a seed of light, into every single action. When you choose to treat a stranger with an unearned and unexpected kindness, when you take a few extra minutes to clear up a small misunderstanding instead of letting it fester, when you finish something you started even though no one is pushing you, in each of these moments you are reaffirming to yourself and to the universe a profound and life-altering truth. I do not live to chase outcomes. I live to be fully present in the process. And that process, one small intentional step at a time, is quietly and inexorably shaping a life of deep and unshakable purpose. Every act you do, no matter how anonymous or seemingly insignificant, carries within it a quiet, powerful declaration. I live for a reason. Once you truly understand this, you will no longer need external validation or the applause of others to feel complete. You will stop seeing your daily work as ordinary or your life as unremarkable, because you will have recognized the sacred potential for meaning that exists within each and every moment. And once you see it, you have the right and the responsibility to transform that moment into a meaningful part of your journey. Many people write out a long and inspiring life purpose statement, carefully crafting the perfect words, but then they live each day in a way that is completely and tragically removed from it. Purpose does not need to be written in formal, elegant language. It needs to be lived out, quietly and consistently. You do not need to declare, "I live to help the world." You only need to help one specific person in one specific moment through one specific compassionate act. Each day you do that, you're walking the right path. Not the path defined by the hollow standards of others, but the one that aligns with the deepest and truest values you have chosen to carry. If you feel lost, Do not search for the answers in distant, far-off places. Come back to what is nearest. What is the one small thing you can do right now, today, to make someone feel valued, to make a space a little better, to carry out a single task with just a bit more care? When you can answer that question, and more importantly, when you act on it, you're no longer searching for your purpose. You are already living in it. And here is the true miracle. The more small, right things you do, the more you are naturally and effortlessly led to larger and deeper things. There is no excess, no wasted motion in a life that is lived with awareness. No action is too small if it is done with a pure intention and your full, undivided presence. No human being can walk far if every single step carries the crushing burden of self-condemnation. No one can ever be truly and sustainably happy if each day is lived within the four walls of an inner dialogue filled with relentless criticism and quiet torment. What ultimately destroys our inner peace is not the harshness of the outside world. It is the insidious, corrosive, and ever-present voice of the harsh judge who lives inside our own head. It is the cruel whisper that arises each time you make a mistake, each time you fall behind, each time you fail to meet an impossible expectation. Many people operate under the dangerous and culturally ingrained delusion that the more they blame themselves, the more they punish themselves, the more they will grow. But the unshakable truth is this: no sustainable progress has ever been built on a foundation of shame and self-punishment. All real, lasting, and meaningful change begins with an act of profound and often difficult courage, the act of kindness toward oneself. This internal voice is what psychologists refer to as the inner critic. It is not you. It is a programmed part of your psyche, often formed in childhood as a defense mechanism to preempt criticism from others by criticizing yourself first. But what was once a survival strategy has now become a tyrannical inner ruler. You can set the highest standards for yourself. You can aim to become a better, stronger, more virtuous version of yourself. But if, every single time you fall short of that ideal, you turn to the weapons of self-hatred and self-contempt, then you're not growing. You're engaging in an act of profound self-destruction. You're digging a deep and lonely hole inside your own heart, a hole that will eventually become so dark and so cold that even you will no longer want to live there. There is no one in this entire universe you are closer to than yourself. If you lived in a physical house where every single day you were bombarded with a constant stream of scolding, of negative comparisons, and of harsh judgments, you would, without a second thought, leave. And yet, if you have turned your own mind into such a place, you're cutting yourself off from any possible path that leads back to peace. Kindness is not leniency. It is not a weak or permissive act of making excuses for your failures or blaming your circumstances. It is the radical recognition that you are, in fact, human. And to be human is to be a complex and often contradictory creature, to be strong sometimes and weak at other times, to be shining sometimes and lost at other times, to be right sometimes and to be profoundly wrong at others. To be kind to yourself means having the courage to face your mistakes with an unblinking honesty, but then refusing to nail yourself to the cross of them. It means learning the lesson that needs to be learned without carrying the life sentence of shame. It means continuing to move forward, not with a heart torn apart by the shards of regret, but with a clearer and more compassionate awareness. This is the groundbreaking work of researcher to doctor, Kristin Neff, who has scientifically demonstrated the profound difference between self-esteem and self-compassion. Self-esteem is often contingent on external success. It is a fair-weather friend that abandons you the moment you fail. Self-compassion, however, is a stable and unconditional source of inner strength. It involves treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a good friend who is struggling. And her research has proven, with hard data, that individuals with higher levels of self-compassion demonstrate greater emotional resilience, lower levels of anxiety and depression, and a greater motivation to improve themselves after a failure. You do not need to become someone else to deserve love. You do not need to be perfect to be treated with kindness, especially by your own self. The very same compassion you would so readily and automatically offer to a friend in pain is the same compassion you must now learn to offer to yourself. Do not criticize yourself for not being as far along on your journey as someone else. They have a different path, a different starting point, a different set of hidden circumstances. You were not born to compete with anyone but to live honestly and courageously with your own unique path. Pay close attention to how you speak to yourself in the immediate aftermath of a mistake. Are you using words you would never, ever dare to say to a friend who is in pain? Are you repeating the toxic, soul-crushing mantras of, "I'm awful, I'm worthless, I always screw up"? If so, you must stop. Because that is not mindfulness. That is a deeply ingrained habit of self-destruction, and no one can ever build a happy and resilient life on a foundation of curses whispered from their own mouth. Self-blame is a form of time travel that drags you, against your will, back into the prison of the past. Kindness brings you back to the power of the present. And it is only in the present that you have the power to choose again. When you are kind to yourself, you create the necessary psychological space for healing and for growth. You do not deny your mistakes, but you also do not allow them to define your entire identity. You learn to make the critical and life-saving distinction between "I did something wrong" and "I am a bad person." These are two profoundly different things. One refers to a specific, correctable behavior. The other is a damning judgment on your entire identity, and you do not need to equate the two. Actions can be corrected, but if you fundamentally reject your own self, you're cutting off the very root of all possible improvement. The harsher you are with yourself, the easier it becomes to be harsh with others. The more you lack a sense of inner compassion, the more reactive and judgmental you will be to the world around you. On the other hand, when you learn to speak to yourself with a consistent gentleness, you will begin to see others with a greater and more profound tolerance. And from there, you will begin to live with a lighter energy, a greater sense of openness, no longer straining to prove anything, no longer shrinking from your own mistakes, no longer carrying the crushing and useless weight of what cannot be changed. No chain binds a human soul as long, as deeply, or as painfully as the chain of unresolved guilt. People often assume that what exhausts them, what holds them back, what prevents them from living with a full and expansive heart, is the pressure of the external world. But, in reality, it is the simmering, corrosive layers of resentment they hold against themselves that prevent them from ever truly living fully. A mistake that has been left unforgiven becomes a heavy, invisible burden you carry on your back, day after weary day. A memory that has not been reconciled with compassion becomes a prison, its cold, gray walls built from your own self-judgment, and you cannot hope to release the full, vibrant, creative force of your life if the deepest part of you is still shackled to the things you refuse to let go of. Forgiving yourself is not a weak or permissive way to deny your mistakes. It is not a free pass for harmful behavior. It is, in fact, the bravest and most difficult act a human being can perform. It is the act of someone who is mature enough to take full and complete responsibility for their past, to learn the necessary and often painful lesson, and then to choose, with a sovereign and conscious will, to unshackle themselves and finally move forward. Forgiveness does not erase the past. It does not change what happened. But it does end the prolonged, insidious, and ultimately useless punishment you keep inflicting upon yourself in the present. And it is only when you stop actively punishing yourself that you can summon your full, undivided inner strength to live a more profound, more meaningful, and more present life. Your inner power, your creative energy, your very life force, cannot and will not flow from a heart that has been cracked and splintered by the relentless torment of your own self-recrimination. You may possess all the talent, all the willpower, and all the ambition in the world. But if deep inside there is still a small, hidden fragment of you that despises a part of your own past, you will never, ever reach a state of true and lasting freedom. This is not just a psychological state. It is a physiological one. Chronic guilt and shame are associated with a hyperactive amygdala, the brain's fear center, and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol. You are, in a very real sense, keeping your own body in a perpetual, low-grade state of fight or flight, a state that is biologically incompatible with creativity, with peace, and with expansive growth. In its most extreme form, this becomes what psychologists term a moral injury, a deep soul wound that occurs when your actions have violated your own most deeply held moral beliefs. And the only path to healing that profound wound is through the difficult and sacred work of self-forgiveness. Be honest with yourself. Haven't there been times when you believed, with a cold and heavy certainty, that you did not deserve to move forward, that you did not deserve love, that you did not deserve a new chance simply because you had not yet forgiven something in your own past? Haven't you ever denied yourself a moment of happiness by thinking, "I've made too many mistakes"? The phrases, "I'm not good enough," "I ruined everything," "I deserve this pain." These are not just thoughts. They are curses you repeat to yourself. And the more you repeat them, the deeper you sink into a state of learned helplessness. This is the Zeigarnik effect. In action, the psychological tendency for our minds to remain fixated on uncompleted or interrupted tasks. An unresolved guilt is the ultimate uncompleted task for the psyche. It keeps the painful memory and its associated negative emotions perpetually active, constantly draining your precious cognitive and emotional resources. Forgiveness is the act of finally completing the task of reconciliation. Each time you withhold forgiveness from yourself, you are making a conscious choice to keep the wound open. And no wound can ever hope to heal if you insist on reopening it, day after day, with the sharp and familiar blade of your own resentment. Forgiveness does not arise from a fleeting, passive emotion. It is a conscious, deliberate, and often difficult decision. You choose to forgive, not because it suddenly feels easy, but because you finally understand that holding on to the pain does not make you stronger. It only makes you smaller. You choose to let go, not because the past wrong deserves to be excused, but because you know with a new and profound clarity that if you do not let it go, you will be the one who withers and dies under its weight. Forgiveness is the ultimate gift you give to yourself, so that you can live fully, so that you can heal, and so that you can finally direct all of your precious energy toward building your future instead of merely enduring your past. When you forgive, you are not erasing your past self. You are reestablishing your relationship with them. You are sitting down with the younger, more foolish, more frightened version of you, not to erase their actions, but to understand them with a new and compassionate love. You're placing a gentle hand on the shoulder of the one who made the mistakes, your own self, and you're saying, "I understand why you acted that way. I understand how your unconsciousness, your fear, and your inexperience led you down that path, and I forgive you. Not because it was right, but because I want us to be free." From that place of profound inner reconciliation, you are no longer a victim of your own past. You become the one who takes charge of creating your present. You cannot hope to write a new, more beautiful chapter of your life if you insist on rereading the same old, tear-stained page over and over again. Forgiving yourself is how you finally turn that page. Not to deny that it was written, but to bravely move on to the next. Forgiveness brings you back to a state of balance, to the sacred place where your creative energy can finally flow, where you are no longer ruled by the toxic, critical voice in your head, where you no longer have to strain to prove anything, but can simply be present and live truthfully, fully, and meaningfully. Don't wait until you feel ready to start forgiving. Begin the act, and the feeling will follow. And if you can stand in front of your own reflection and say, with a quiet and unshakable dignity, "Whatever has happened, I still choose to love myself enough to keep living," you will see that your inner power was never gone. It was only blocked, and forgiveness is the master key that finally unlocks that gate, the gate that leads you back to yourself, whole, strong, and free. There are some things in your life that cannot be healed by understanding more, by analyzing deeper, or by turning them over and over again in your mind in a relentless and futile search for a reason. The more you try to find out exactly why that person did what they did, why that tragic event had to happen, why you cannot seem to change the unchangeable past, the more you bind your own soul with chains of your own forging to an endless cycle of torment. Not every wound in this life needs to be fully explained. Some pains do not need answers. They need only one thing from you, the profound and terrifying courage to let them go. Letting go is not an act of giving up. It is not a weak or passive surrender, nor is it a cold and convenient forgetting of what was once important to you. Letting go is a conscious and strategic act of recognizing what no longer serves your peace, what no longer contributes to your growth, and what is actively poisoning your present. It is the wisest of acts, the moment you can finally say to yourself, with a quiet and unshakable dignity, "I have held on to this long enough. I have carried this weight for as far as I can. Now, I choose to set it down so that I may finally move on." And in the very moment you do that, you lose nothing of value. You are, in fact, reclaiming the most precious and vital part of your freedom that had been seized and held hostage by your past. People often believe, with a kind of tragic and misguided nobility, that holding on is a sign of strength. But the truth is, sometimes it is the very act of gripping that makes you bleed. A clenched fist, held too long and too tightly around a shard of broken glass, eventually becomes numb. An emotion of grief or resentment, kept too long in the chambers of the heart, eventually freezes it solid. This is not just a poetic metaphor, It is a psychological reality. In the world of behavioral economics, there is a powerful cognitive bias known as the sunk cost fallacy. It is our irrational tendency to continue an endeavor, not because it offers a positive future, but because we have already invested so much in it. So much time, so much money, so much effort. We think, I've already come this far, I can't quit now, even when all evidence suggests that continuing is the path to ruin. The same fallacy applies to our emotional lives. We hold on to a dead relationship, a painful grudge, or a story of past victimhood because we have invested so much of our identity in it. Letting go feels like admitting that all of our past suffering was for nothing, but holding on is the greater tragedy. It is the act of continuously pouring your precious, finite life energy into a black hole, a past that can never, ever give you a return on your investment. The more you cling to what has already passed, the more you drain the very vitality of your present. And no one can ever hope to fully live today if their heart and their mind are still filled with the shattered, decaying pieces of a yesterday they refuse to release. There are stories in your life for which you will never receive an apology. There are people who will leave without ever giving you an explanation. There are dreams that will fall apart, not because of anyone's specific fault, but simply because the world works in ways you cannot and will never fully control. And in the face of these great and painful incompletions, you have only two real choices. 1. To live the rest of your life carrying a malignant, soul-eating tumor called why? Or 2. To accept, with a profound and liberating maturity, that not everything in this universe has a neat and tidy ending, and yet you still have the sovereign right to choose your own peace. This is the very essence of the Buddhist teaching on non-attachment, nakama. The Buddha taught that suffering, dukkha, does not arise from the painful events of life themselves, but from our clinging, our craving, our desperate attachment, upadana, to things being other than they are. We suffer not because we lost something, but because we are attached to having it. We suffer not because someone hurt us, but because we are attached to the idea that they should not have. Letting go, therefore, is the ultimate spiritual practice. It is an internal act. It requires no public announcement, no grand declaration. It is just a quiet, internal decision to stop letting the past dictate the terms of your present. To stop replaying the old, painful story in your mind, a story that has become so familiar it feels like a part of you. And in that sacred silence, in that newly created space, you will finally begin to hear the steady, life-affirming rhythm of your own heart again. A rhythm that is no longer suffocated by the heavy weight of sorrow. Sometimes, what you most need to let go of is not another person, but the elaborate and often impossible expectations you placed upon them. The idealized image you created in your mind of how your life should have been. The vision of perfection you held that the real, messy, and imperfect world never could and never will match. And when you finally release those expectations, you do not become cold or cynical. In fact, for the first time, you begin to see the world and the people in it more clearly for what they truly are, not for what you wanted them to be. Letting go does not make you weak. It is the clearest and most undeniable sign of maturity. You have finally gone far enough on your journey to know what should continue and what must now come to a close. You understand, on a cellular level, that your life energy is not an infinite resource, and you're choosing, with the wisdom of a seasoned strategist, to pour it into what nourishes you, not into what depletes you day by day. You are finally wise enough to know that not all pain needs to be held as a permanent part of your identity. Perhaps letting go is the deepest and most profound act of self-love. You are simply saying to yourself, I choose to move on with a lighter heart, with a renewed perspective, with gratitude for the lesson this pain has taught me, and I will no longer allow it to imprison me. From that very moment, you begin to live again, not under the long, dark shadow of your past, but in the clean, bright, and expansive light of your own freedom. If happiness were something you could only touch for a fleeting, brilliant moment before it vanished like a shooting star across the night sky, then the world would be a place of perpetual misery, a world full of people who had once been happy, yet remain condemned to live in the long, dark shadow of its memory. But true, deep, and enduring happiness is not the random coincidence of a perfect set of external conditions. It is not a sudden and benevolent gift from the universe, nor is it the result of a perfectly aligned and fortunate series of events. Happiness, if it is to be a deep and unshakable part of your life, is always, and without exception, the outcome of intentionally and deliberately cultivated habits. It is not something you wait for. It is something you train for. It is not something that arrives when you are lucky. It is a reward earned through the quiet and often thankless currency of your own discipline. The happiest people you will ever meet are not those who have been blessed with the fewest struggles. They are, in fact, often those who have endured the most. They are simply the ones who have built the strongest and most resilient mental habits. They do not live their lives wishing for a world without challenges, but instead they have meticulously built a set of positive, automatic reflexes that allow them to navigate those very challenges with a sense of calmness, with intention, and with grace. Each morning, they do not merely wake up and passively wait to see what good might happen to them. They actively and deliberately generate their own joy through the simplest of acts, the quiet ritual of sipping warm water in the silence before the world awakens, the disciplined practice of journaling a few honest thoughts to clear the mind, the sacred act of walking in silence without a destination, just to feel the ground beneath their feet, the conscious choice of sending a single, kind message to another human being. These seemingly ordinary, almost trivial practices, when repeated with the unwavering consistency of the rising sun, form a solid and unbreakable foundation for a joyful state of being, a state that no external turbulence can ever easily erase. This is not a matter of philosophy. It is a matter of profound neurological engineering. The human brain, in its magnificent efficiency, is a habit-making machine. Its primary goal is to conserve cognitive energy. When you perform any action repeatedly, your brain begins to automate it, transferring the control from the effortful, energy-intensive prefrontal cortex to the efficient, automatic basal ganglia. This is the very process that allows you to drive a car or tie your shoes without conscious thought. It is the formation of a habit loop, a cue, a routine, and a reward. And what you may not realize is that you are, at this very moment, running a set of deeply ingrained happiness habits or unhappiness habits. A person who has, over years, habitually responded to stress with a complaint, to a setback with self-blame, and to a moment of quiet with a nervous glance at their phone, has built a powerful, automated, neurological superhighway to a state of misery. But the reverse is also true. You can, with deliberate and conscious intention, build a new set of superhighways, ones that lead directly to a state of calm, of gratitude, and of quiet joy. You can live a life surrounded by all the external markers of success and still feel a profound and aching emptiness if you have not been nurtured from within by the consistent practice of the habits of happiness. You can have every logical reason to be joyful and still be shrouded in a cloud of gloom if you have been biologically conditioned to respond to the world with negativity, with doubt, with complaints, and with criticism. On the other hand, a person who is going through the most difficult of circumstances can still carry a quiet and resilient light in their heart if they know how to return again and again to the simple, grounding habits that nurture the inner self. The habits of gratitude, of presence, of mindful observation, of intentional speech, and of constructive, positive thinking. Because true, sustainable happiness does not depend on your external circumstances. It depends, almost entirely, on how you choose to respond to those circumstances, day by day, moment by moment. Every single repeated action reinforces an inner state. Each time you choose to smile, even a small, gentle smile, instead of frowning in a moment of frustration, you are not faking it. You are sending a powerful biochemical signal to your nervous system, a signal that begins the process of reprogramming it toward a state of greater positivity. Each time you practice a moment of genuine gratitude instead of allowing your mind to be consumed by resentment, you're training your brain to see the world not as a place of threat and scarcity, but as a place rich with opportunity and quiet beauty. Each time you choose to listen with a patient and open heart, rather than reacting with an impulsive and defensive anger, you're building a habit that fosters a deep and lasting sense of connection and understanding. Happiness, therefore, does not stem from the arrival of grand, life-altering gestures, but from the quiet, relentless accumulation of thousands of small, courageous choices you repeat daily, until they become as natural and as effortless as your own breathing. Building the habit of happiness does not require you to change your entire life overnight. It begins with the tiniest of choices, repeated with an almost religious consistency. The person who chooses to exercise each morning does not do so because they are not busy. They do so because they understand, on a cellular level, that their physical health is the very foundation of their positive emotions. The person who silences their phone in the evening is not free of obligations. They simply understand that a moment of stillness is the essential fuel for their inner peace. These things are not expensive. They are not complex, but when they are practiced with a relentless regularity, they transform you into someone who is so profoundly energized by life that no external setback can ever easily break you. No one is immune to hardship. No one, no matter how privileged, how intelligent, or how well prepared, goes through this life without stumbling at least once. But there is one fundamental, world-altering quality that separates those who are merely broken by the fall from those who rise again, stronger and more whole than they were before, and that quality is resilience. But let us go even deeper. The world today glorifies success, but it often forgets to teach the far more vital art of endurance. Resilience is not a cold, unfeeling hardness. It is an intentional, profound flexibility. It is the ability to withstand the immense pressure of adversity without losing the goodness, the softness, and the compassion at your very core. The resilient person does not deny their pain or reject their failure, but they do not, under any circumstances, allow those things to define who they are. They face what is happening head-on. They accept it with a clear-eyed realism. They learn from it with the humility of a student. They adapt their strategy, and then they move forward, without the noise of complaint, without the poison of blame, without the self-indulgent performance of playing the victim. Let us elevate this concept even further. In his groundbreaking work, the scholar and risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb introduced a concept that goes beyond mere resilience: anti-fragility. The resilient object withstands a shock and returns to its original state. The fragile object breaks under a shock. But the anti-fragile, it gains from disorder. It becomes stronger, more intelligent, and more capable because it has been subjected to stress and volatility. A teacup is fragile. A block of granite is resilient. But your own human spirit has the potential to be anti-fragile. You're not meant to simply survive the storms of life. You were designed to be transformed by them. Resilience is not born in the light. It is forged in the deepest and most absolute darkness. No one teaches you how to rise better than the times you have fallen hard, and no abstract theory can ever make you stronger than the real, lived, and often brutal experience of having once lost everything, but still refusing to lose yourself. Each time you overcome, you're not just returning to your baseline. You're adding another layer of invisible psychological armor, another layer of myelin around the neural pathways of your courage, shielding your mind from the inevitable storms of the future. And from that place of anti-fragile strength, you unlock the capacity for the most powerful and strategic remedy the world has ever known. A remedy that can instantly lift your mood, ignite an inner warmth, connect you deeply with the world around you, and make your life feel profoundly meaningful. It is the simple, radical, and world-altering act of kindness. It costs nothing. It depends on no external circumstance, and it requires no special degree or skill. The moment you choose a kind act, no matter how small, you're not just helping another, you're engaging in a profound act of self-healing. The fascinating part is that when you help someone else feel better, the very first person to receive that positive, life-affirming energy is you. Your brain reacts immediately. Oxytocin, the love hormone, is released, fostering feelings of connection and trust. Your nervous system calms. Your cortisol levels drop, and your entire mental state enters a restorative mode. This is not just a theory. It is a real, measurable biological mechanism, a phenomenon sometimes referred to as the helper's high. On the other hand, those who live only for themselves, who jealously guard every bit of their own interests, who calculate every single interaction based on the narrow and self-serving metric of what's in it for me, often end up feeling the most isolated and the most empty. When you close your heart to others, you also, by an inexorable law, shut the door to the most profound positive emotions within yourself. Without kindness, happiness becomes a lonely, sterile, and spiritually impoverished state. This kindness does not need to be grand. Sometimes it is just a knowing glance of shared humanity with a stranger, a sincere and specific compliment, a timely and heartfelt "How are you?" or a small, almost invisible act that eases another's burden. These seemingly insignificant things, when practiced as a daily discipline, create a powerful field of positive energy around you. Kindness is not weakness. True kindness is not naive. It is a choice made from a place of immense strength. It is the choice to live above the base, selfish, and reactive instincts of our primal brain, and to be guided instead by our highest and most noble inner values. And this choice, this lifestyle of resilience and of kindness, is only truly possible when you have built it upon a foundation of simplicity. It is the excess in our lives that is draining our peace, the commitments we accept because we are afraid to say no, the possessions we buy out of a fear of lacking, the relationships we maintain out of a hollow sense of politeness. When you choose to simplify, you're not choosing poverty. You're choosing clarity. You're making the conscious and deliberate decision to eliminate what no longer serves your inner growth in order to preserve your precious, finite space for what truly fills your life. In a world that glorifies the cult of busyness, those who choose to slow down are the courageous ones. In a society that praises a relentless materialism, those who dare to choose simplicity are the truly strong. And it is in this simplicity that you will find the final and most important ingredient of a happy life: presence. In that uncluttered, intentional space you have created, you can finally hear the quiet call of your deepest self, the self that knows that real meaning is not a destination to be found, but a quality of presence to be lived. Happiness is not a gift granted from the outside, nor is it a reward that someone can bestow or take away. It is the inevitable and beautiful result of an inner journey, a journey where you have mastered your thoughts, your emotions, and your way of responding to life. It is the quiet, unshakable strength you feel when you finally realize that all emotions originate from within, not from the outside. You cannot control the world, but you can, and you must, learn to regulate your inner world. And that singular, sovereign ability is what separates those who drift through life at the mercy of the waves from those who live deliberately, steering their own ship with a calm and steady hand.